Thank you so much for joining us for today's video. But first, here's a short preview from our latest video from our new channel, Paranormally Listed. If you want to watch the rest of the video, we'll have a link at the end of this video. Matthews called the base at around 8:45 p.m. His colleague said that someone would pick him up in a minute. While Matthews was waiting for his ride, he saw lights in the sky moving towards him. Suddenly, he was overcome with fear. He picked up the phone and called the base again to tell them something strange was happening. His colleague asked him where he had been. Matthew said he hadn't moved from where he had been standing in front of the grocery store. His colleague said that the truck pulled up at 8:50 p.m., about 5 minutes after he made his call, and he didn't see anyone waiting. Matthews made a second phone call to the base at 9:45 p.m. It had been nearly an hour, but Matthews thought it only had been a couple of minutes. Just before we start today's video, we want to take a few moments to talk about our wonderful sponsor, Magellan TV. Lately, with the intense cold weather and the pandemic, I've been spending a lot of time cooped up inside. That's why I'm so thankful I have Magellan TV, the best documentary streaming service on the planet. Their new releases section is a lifesaver. Last week, I found a really unique documentary called The Writer with No Hands. I thought it was going to be about a writer overcoming a disability, but it was actually a fascinating documentary about a possible CIA conspiracy. Gary DeVore was a screenwriter, most notable for writing action movies like Running Scared and Raw Deal. He died in a mysterious car accident in June 1997, but a university professor named Matthew Alford believes he was killed by the CIA to cover up a secret. The Writer with No Hands is a fascinating documentary that will leave you with more questions than answers. 15 to 20 hours of new material is added to Magellan TV every week. Plus, they already have over 3,000 documentaries, so you're bound to find hours of interesting documentaries to watch. Magellan TV has been a great, long-time sponsor of Criminally Listed, and we're so grateful for their support. They are offering a 1-month free trial, so you can check out The Writer with No Hands, plus their other great documentaries. To get this amazing offer, go to try.magellantv.com/criminallylisted. So check out Magellan TV today, because you'll find something great to watch, and you'll be supporting Criminally Listed in the process. Number 3. Terry Hurst. In the summer of 2004, 17-year-old Terry Hurst lived with his foster family in Penistone, which is a county in South Yorkshire, England. He had lived with his foster family since he was 20 months old. Terry, who had learning difficulties and a speech impediment, was considered good-natured and friendly. He loved the outdoors. On July 19, 2004, 3 acquaintances, 17-year-old John Sodden, 17-year-old Jermaine James, and 15-year-old Rebecca Peters, invited him to go camping. Terry didn't know the 3 teens well, but he decided to go. They went to a wooded area about a mile outside the village of Boulderstone and set up their tents. There was an argument about the campsite at some point, but it was nothing too serious. That evening, Sodden, James, and Peters told Terry they were going to get some alcohol from one of their parents' homes. As the trio walked back to the campsite, they picked up 2 scythes from a churchyard. The scythes were used to cut overgrown grass. When they returned to the campsite, Terry was inside the tent. He was wearing boxer shorts and socks. He was pulled out of the tent and attacked with the scythes. Terry managed to run away and he made it across several fields, but then he was tackled and the attack continued. At some point, a plastic bag was placed over his head and then his head was stomped on. About 24 hours after the attack, his body was found in a ditch. The scythe was still embedded in his neck and the plastic bag was over his head. The medical examiner determined he had suffered 80 wounds, including a broken jaw. The 3 teens were quickly arrested for the brutal murder. None of them explained why they killed the 17-year-old boy. All 3 had minor run-ins with the law, but nothing they had done suggested that they were capable of that level of brutality. In March 2005, all three pleaded guilty, and they were all sentenced to life in prison. Jermaine James and Rebecca Peters were eligible for parole after 13 years, and John Sodden was eligible for parole after 15 years. The judge believed that Sodden was the ringleader. That means all three would have been eligible for parole over the past few years. However, no reports can be found regarding whether they were released or if they are still incarcerated. At the time of this video, John Sodden and Jermaine James would be 34 years old, and Rebecca Peters would be 33 years old. Number 2. Jada Beth Williams. In 2012, Shauna Pearson had multiple generations of her family living in the home she shared with her friend, Sean Williamson, in Jackson County, Ohio. This included her 18-year-old son, Matthew Caleb Pearson, and her granddaughter, 5-year-old Jada Beth Williams. It appeared that Jada and her uncle Matthew got along well, and they had a loving relationship. On the night of August 11, 2012, Shauna went out for the night. After midnight, two friends of Sean Williams came over to the house, Jessica Taylor and Richard James. When Taylor arrived, she noticed some blood on the floor of the front entrance, but that was soon forgotten. The next morning, Taylor told Williamson that she thought she saw a dead body in the garage. Williamson told her it was just a doll. That afternoon, Shauna Pearson arrived home, and she noticed that 5-year-old Jada was missing. The house was searched. Richard James looked in the garage, and in a plastic container, he found Jada's dead body. It was the same place where Jessica Taylor thought she saw the dead body. Jada had died from severe head injuries. She had been struck on the head several times with a sickle, which is a short-handled farm tool with a crescent blade. It's sometimes called a hand scythe. 18-year-old Matthew Pearson was interviewed. He said that he went to bed sometime between 9 and 10 p.m. He said when he went to bed, Jada was sleeping on a pallet in the dining room. He claimed that when he got up 12 hours later, he didn't see her. The police continued to question Matthew, and he eventually admitted to killing his 5-year-old niece. However, he never gave a motive for the murder. Matthew did not have a serious criminal record before the murder. He was given a psych evaluation, and he was not considered insane at the time of the murder. In July 2013, Matthew Pearson pleaded guilty to aggravated murder. The judge asked him if he had anything to say, and Matthew cryptically said, "Well, I didn't do this because I wanted to. I did this because he made me do it." No one is sure what he meant by this comment. Matthew has never revealed why he killed his niece. At the time of this recording, 28-year-old Matthew Pearson is incarcerated at the Trumbull Correctional Institution in Warren, Ohio. He'll be eligible for parole in June 2037 when he'll be 43 years old. Number 1. John Simmons and Donna Fitzhugh. On July 12, 1971, 17 people were camping in California's Sierra foothills. They were camping on a sand pit called the Dog Bar, which was near the banks of the Bear River. 20-year-old Kenneth Garby and his 23-year-old wife, Elizabeth, were playing cards in their tent. Suddenly, the back of the tent was cut open. A man with a creepy smile on his face stuck his head into the tent and said, "Hello there." Kenneth warned his wife that the man had a knife. It was actually a sickle with what was described as a wickedly curved blade. Kenneth tried to grab the knife, and Elizabeth ran from the tent. The man freed himself from Kenneth and then attacked him. He laughed and growled like an animal as he slashed Kenneth 10 times. Kenneth then tried to run from the tent. When he turned his back, the man ran the knife across his back. The sounds of the attack caught the attention of other people who were camping nearby. One of those campers was 29-year-old John Simmons. He had been staying in a truck camper about 20 feet from where Kenneth was attacked. Simmons grabbed his .41 caliber pistol. As the man sprinted towards Simmons, he fired 3 shots at him, but he missed each time. The man then proceeded to hack away at 29-year-old John Simmons. Once he was done, he picked up Simmons' gun and took it with him. After Elizabeth Garby fled her tent, she went to the tent where 28-year-old Donna Fitzhugh was staying with her husband, her brother, Kevin Parker, and his wife, Martha Parker, along with their 6 children. When the attack started, Donna and Martha's husbands were panning for gold. Donna grabbed a .22 caliber rifle and ran from the tent. But before she could get the safety off, the man attacked her with a sickle and cut a major artery between her neck and her shoulder. He then attacked Donna's sister-in-law, Martha Parker. He hacked at her several times. After that, the man with a sickle ran into the woods. Help was called for, and Martha Parker and Kenneth Garby were rushed to the hospital. Tragically, nothing could be done for 28-year-old Donna Fitzhugh and 29-year-old John Simmons. They were pronounced dead at the scene. Amazingly, despite their serious wounds, Martha and Kenneth survived. A massive search was conducted for the attacker. The police talked to several locals, and they thought that the killer could have been 43-year-old Clarence Otis Smith. Clarence lived in Weimar, California, an unincorporated community about 45 minutes northeast of Sacramento. It's home to a couple hundred people. Clarence's home was about 3 miles from the crime scene. The police went to interview him the morning after the murders. They noticed he had several deep cuts on his hands and his head. He said he had been carrying a glass panel door when he tripped and fell through it. The police didn't believe his story, but they didn't have any evidence that he was the killer. They told him not to go anywhere because they might have more questions for him. But 10 days after he was questioned, Clarence Smith quit his job and collected his last paycheck. Then he fled to parts unknown. A warrant for his arrest was issued and a massive manhunt was launched. After he left, the police searched his property. They found John Simmons' gun and the sickle, which still had blood on it. While Clarence was on the lam, the police learned about his life. Months earlier, 43-year-old Clarence Otis Smith had lived with his 34-year-old wife, Georgina, their 2 children, and Georgina's 2 children from a previous marriage. Clarence had worked as a trash collector, and his co-workers used to think he was a regular guy. He smoked, he drank, and he swore. But then they started to notice that earlier that year, he started acting strangely. That year, a male-ordained minister named Everett T. Richardson moved in with Clarence and his family. It's not clear how Richardson became acquainted with Clarence. Richardson was an unusual figure who preached while wearing a black suit, white shirt, and black hat. After Richardson moved in, Clarence started to act even more strangely. After Richardson moved in with the family, he and Clarence made plans to convert part of the family's house into a chapel. But according to Richardson, there were problems. The house was plagued with demons. He claimed he had seen demons 34 times in the house. To keep the demons out, aluminum foil was placed around the windows and Georgina prayed. Richardson also said that Clarence's 15-year-old stepdaughter, Mary, had become possessed by demons. Richardson and 2 other ministers performed an exorcism on her. Mary ended up moving out shortly afterward. After the attempted exorcism, Richardson started going on trips with Georgina to spread his message. Clarence was upset that his wife was on the road with another man. Then, on June 25, 1971, tragedy struck. Clarence was driving his garbage truck and his 8-year-old stepson, Donald, was in the passenger seat. Clarence was attempting to park on the shoulder of the highway, but he miscalculated and the truck rolled down the embankment. Donald was thrown from the truck and killed. When the accident happened, his mother was on the road with a preacher. Clarence was devastated by the accident. Just days after the funeral, he snapped and kicked Georgina, Richardson, and the children out of the house. The four of them settled in a motel in Sacramento, but they had a problem. They didn't have any money. So Richardson and Georgina would sneak back into the house and steal things to pawn. On July 12, 1971, Richardson, Georgina, and the two kids went back to the house. Clarence threatened them with a knife. Clarence told them to leave because he had something to do and he didn't want them around when he did it. They took his threat as real and they left. Later that night, the campers were attacked. It turned out that Clarence realized that things from his house had been stolen, but he didn't think that Richardson and Georgina had stolen them. Instead, he thought it was the campers. Clarence was found in Mexico City, Mexico, in the first week of August 1971. On August 6th, he was handed over to the FBI. He was eventually extradited to California, where he was charged with 2 counts of murder and assault and mayhem. He pleaded not guilty and not guilty by reason of insanity. Clarence Smith went to trial in January 1972. He testified that demons harassed him. 2 of his friends testified, and they said that on the days before the murders, Clarence talked about getting revenge on the hippies for stealing his belongings. The trial lasted 12 days. Then the jury deliberated 20 hours over 2 days. He was found guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Donna Fitzhugh and second-degree murder in the death of John Simmons. For the first-degree murder charge, he was looking at the death penalty. However, he was sentenced to life in prison for both murders. Smith spent the rest of his life in prison. He died in 2008 at the age of 80. Thank you so much for watching today's video. We want to mention that we're still releasing new episodes of our podcast, Into the Killing. We've just changed the schedule to release them bi-weekly now. You can find Into the Killing on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and anywhere you find your favorite podcasts. But that's all for today. Thank you again for watching.